I'm taking you back, testing your patience, again, to St Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Williamstown, and to the little Sunday school hall at the side of the building. There's a 14-year-old version of me, and I'm doing my semaphore test for my second-class badge for Girl Guides. And the message that I'm translating with great anxiety is coming out COMEUNTOTO, until I get, "Come unto me, all ye who labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." I later looked up the full quote in the Bible, and the rest of it in the New Revised Standard Version reads, "Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." I've always loved the poetry and the imagery of those words, and they've stayed with me, obviously. And at my recent Willie High school reunion, I was talking to a woman who was a fellow Girl Guide, and we were joined by an older person, and it turned out she was my guide captain's cousin. And I told her of my memory of semaphore test and this quote, and she was just so delighted. She couldn't wait to get back to my cousin Kath White to tell her of our meeting up and my memory. So that's a background story for me to introduce this verse that has obviously stayed with me, and it's had many meanings as I've progressed over the years. And we have an image of the beast of burden, yoked to the plough. It's an age-old one, and it would have been so very familiar to Jesus' listeners. And I think we can also see that the metaphor is leading to an often held belief that following the way of Jesus involves hard work and demands sacrifice. Initially, despite Jesus saying that his burden is easy, I also saw the yoke as demanding a heavy burden to serve. So my Presbyterian Jesus also meant sacrifice and denial. So on leaving school, I trooped off to take up nursing at the Alfred Hospital. And I certainly found nursing emotionally, physically and mentally very demanding. And I was talking with Zara's mother, who was a nurse around my time, and it was hard work. And we had ward sisters who were ex-army, and they treated us as though we were on the parade ground. And I ran on fear a lot of the time, because it was true. We really did bury our mistakes, and I could tell you a few stories, but that's not here. I mentioned to an old nursing friend how I used to be exhausted after a day's work, and what she said surprised me. She said, "Well, you ran twice as fast as the rest of us, so maybe that's why I later took up race walking." Many of the monastic orders also viewed the way of Jesus as taking up the burden or the cross as a hard road to follow. They were into self-flagellation, for example, to remind adherents of the suffering nature of a so-called follower of Jesus. A metaphysical meaning for the verse is that we join with Spirit. As we join with Spirit, life could be lived with a sure knowledge of being in harmony with the divine plan. Reverend Grace loves word derivations, and she pointed out that in Jacobean English particularly, a burden means a refrain or the chorus of a song. So I guess a chorus could put us in great harmony with the divine. But I prefer to think that Jesus was talking about the paradox of mystical thinking. That is, that we take up what the world might see as a burden, but by doing so, we move to a new way of being that takes us to a level of awakening that cannot be experienced in the usual time-space continuum. When we're yoked with our indwelling divine presence, we're truly in the most important relationship of our lives. And as Gerald Jampolsky in our book states, from this flows love, peace, patience, gentleness, kindness and forgiveness. Rather than life being a struggle, it becomes easier as we move our focus from the third dimensional thinking of the five senses to viewing the possibilities of life from the fourth dimension, what I like to think of as the world of grace and synchronicity. Floris Scovel-Shinn, in The Game of Life and How to Play It, quotes a metaphysician as saying that the only thing that gives anything weight in nature is the law of gravity. And as a boulder could be taken, if a boulder could be taken above the planet, there would be no weight in that boulder. And that's what Jesus meant when he said, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." She says that Jesus had overcome the world vibration and functioned in the fourth vibrational realm, where there's only perfection, completion, life and joy. Being in this realm should be easy, but our human-based fears, emotions and thoughts separate us from the grace of casting the burden, as she quotes Psalm 55 as saying. It seems to me that as we progress on the spiritual path, we don't need a strong yoke to bind us to the divine. I have an image of the yoke becoming a veil or a scarf, and we look through its thinning fabric at glimpses of life in the fourth dimension that inspire us to continue to seek and to learn. And we have the magnificent teachings of Jesus and the Buddha who lived in that realm continuously. As our wonderful Sylvia pointed out a couple of weeks ago, seemingly empty space is filled with whirling atoms, which we can see in mystical moments of spiritual grace. She quoted Albert Einstein as saying that as a human mind is unable to conceive of the four dimensions, how can it conceive of a God before whom 1,000 years and 1,000 dimensions are as one? It's no wonder, therefore, that overcoming the issues of space-time consciousness fills YouTube presentations and self-help books and all our Unity classics and New Thought classics. The amazing thing is, and I don't think I'm the only one here, I've been following these teachings for years, and yet I'm aware of my absorption of them being a spectacularly slow process. The more the veil thins, however, we become aware of the fact that all life is sacred and the way we perceive the ordinary world shifts. Increasingly, we glimpse the fourth dimension and a reality of defying gravity, where, as we've glimpsed it, we're able to join our third dimensional talents with our fourth dimensional inspiration to become fully human, fully alive. I think there's a book by that title, but I forget.
John Powell.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Thank you. We have all had experiences of being in the mystical realm of the fourth dimension. It's an event that takes us beyond the realm of the senses. In moments of heightened sensitivity, we feel a oneness with another person, with nature, with music, or with the divine. Sometimes also, as Carolyn Mace points out in Defy Gravity, an idea can lift us into the mystical realms as the power of fresh perception has the voltage to reorder our reality in an instant. She says, to be lifted beyond the limitation of ordinary thought, beyond the boundaries of logic and reason, and into cosmic fresh air where you feel suspended in weightlessness, created by a temporary absence of fear, these are the signatures of a mystical experience. These experiences are recognised by the soul rather than the mind, and and therefore may sound trivial if we try telling others about them. And I have such a memory of an experience when I was staying down with friends of Blair Gowrie, and I got up early on New Year's Day, which isn't at all like me. I went down to the back beach and I was sitting there on a rock, and I had this moment of grace where the light was on, it even seemed to be shining out of the rocks, and this clear thought came into my head, it's all here. And because I'm a tragically slow learner, it's taken me years to really know what that was about. It was, don't worry about how you're going to survive as a single parent, blah, 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 blah. There is only this moment. It's all here in this glorious moment. But try telling that to somebody outside of here, and it really wouldn't mean much, I don't think. Once we agree that it exists, why don't we all stay in the fourth dimension? As Gerald Jampolsky points out, our need to be right and our need to control can hinder us from opening the door of the divine in our souls. We hold on to resentments out of fear because we define ourselves through the world of space-time restriction. Ultimately, what we're really giving up is fear of losing our identity. But once we surrender, the paradox is that the treasures of the kingdom of heaven are open to us. Lawrence Scovel-Shinn says that fear is misdirected energy and must be redirected or transmuted into faith. But Esther and Jerry Hicks put it beautifully also when they say that we're so wonderfully free that we can choose bondage if we so desire, and sadly we often do. And they suggest looking up their emotional guidance scale that I mentioned a few weeks ago. And if we're in the lower vibrational levels, like fear, anger or rage, we don't have to beat ourselves up. When we become aware of that old stuff being activated, we don't have to cast around for anyone to blame either. And that's exactly what Gerald Jampolsky is saying in his book, Lovers Letting Go of Fear as well. We can decide that we don't want to feel that way and adjust our thinking to move up the scale. And we don't have to go from fear and anger and guilt straight up to appreciation. We can just, by raising our thoughts and talking to ourselves a little bit and saying, well, this isn't quite a catastrophe, we are actually increasing our vibration at a higher level and therefore able to function and attract to us better circumstances than if we're down in the gloom and doom. And it's amazing what this vibrational thinking helps us to work out. Norman Gunston was on TV last Monday. Did anybody see him? Yeah. And he talked about his depression and how he was taught cognitive behavioural therapy. And it's exactly this. Talk yourself into another level of being. And your vibration, he doesn't mention vibrations, but your vibration changes and things work out in a much more gentle way than if you're in gloom and doom. There's a tragic woman at our local supermarket, and I actually avoid going through her register because her energy level is so miserable that you feel that you've probably paid double for your shopping as you go through. Working on our issues then is good for us, for our well-being, our health, and I've also finally made the connection that we can't really progress into the fourth dimension if we maintain attachment to thoughts of righteous anger, resentment, and so on, and so on, and so on. That causes us to operate at that lower vibration. The attitudinal thinking that Jerry Jampolsky sets out leads us to change our own attitudes rather than trying to change others. Forgiveness, he tells us, is simply the decision not to suffer, and that obviously helps us thin the veil of separation. Florence Scovel-Shinn quotes a Russian metaphysician, Uspensky, as saying that love is a cosmic phenomenon that opens us to the fourth dimensional world, the world of the wondrous. She says that as love is God in manifestation, it's the strongest magnetic force in the universe. Love draws itself to its own. If we operate on the vibration of love, we can be aligned with the gentle, humble way that Jesus described in our quote. We don't need to cling to the illusions of the ego's construction. Paul Hasselbeck writes in Heart-Centered Metaphysics that the fourth dimension is the state of consciousness where all possibilities grow and reside. It's the realm from which we can express divine ideas from divine mind, thus creating an experience of harmony and beauty according to our level of consciousness. Some examples of modern-day mystics who provide inspiration and a glimpse of what we can all achieve are Charles and Myrtle, Emma Curtis Hopkins, and the other New Thought teachers who, from that amazing metaphysical renaissance of New Thought, the New Thought era, from which they sprang onto the world stage. And I think another example, a more recent example, is that of the Caddies and Dorothy McLean. We've got them here, and I know that I've mentioned them before, but they established the Findhorn community. That's Eileen, Dorothy and Peter Caddy. Eileen and Peter Caddy, Dorothy. They established the foundation from virtually nothing. They started the world-famous garden, which when I first got into reading about Findhorn, I think they had a cabbage that weighed 42 kilograms and was edible or something. Amazing stuff. This was all in the sandy shore of the Findhorn Bay in Scotland. They knew nothing about gardening when they started, but they followed Eileen's guidance and also Dorothy's attunement to the spirits of the landscape, the landscape angels. And they lived with Peter and Eileen's 3 sons in a caravan park for something like 6 years, coping with real privation as they did so. Eileen used to get up at 4 o'clock every morning to go to the public toilets in the park, and she did that because she was guided to do that, so that she wouldn't disturb the others, and she wrote down her guidance every day, I think, until she actually passed on. They're wonderful examples of those who, once the possibilities of life in the fourth dimension have been experienced, continue to live their truth, even when there's no third dimension logic to explain it. And they often followed guidance that had no logic. They couldn't get jobs and they couldn't work out why, because Dorothy and Peter were both very accomplished people, but they just kept following their guidance. And Findhorn is now a thriving community of 400 permanent residents, and they've gone there from all over the world. Thousands go there every year to do courses in sustainable living, spirituality, growth, personal growth, meditation, and to experience first-hand life in an eco-village. And other modern-day mystics, such as Carolyn Mason and Ard Toll, run workshops there. And they've got many, many varieties of eco houses. And I've stayed in a couple, and even in a Scottish winter, the houses have triple glazing, and the windows are positioned so that they get every bit of the appropriate sun, and you hardly need any heating. And these are, does anybody know, there's Ingrid's not here, she's been there, but these are from whiskey barrels. and we had afternoon tea in one, and they're just fabulous. They're sort of just several levels and just beautiful, and they have a smell of sherry. I guess the cedar or whatever it is lined in that before the whiskey. And then we've got another one of Cluny. This is the magnificent Cluny hotel that it was. And Eileen and Peter and Dorothy ran that as a hotel before their job contract was terminated. And they always thought they would go back there to run the hotel again. But there was some stuff that couldn't be explained, and they never did go back. But Eileen's guidance kept telling her that they would go back one day, but it would be in a way that they couldn't yet envisage. And they did go back, but that is now part of the Findhorn Foundation, where courses are run, and it's just the most glorious building set in the most beautiful grounds. But there's a wonderful story of Eileen's guidance being beyond logic, and that was when they were running it as a hotel. Their cook, who they had supported even though he was a heavy drinker, was absolutely rolling drunk one night, and they had all these meals because it was a very high-class hotel. They had all of these meals to get out. And so Eileen went into guidance, and her guidance was, she was told, tell Peter to give him some more whiskey. And that was totally normal third-dimensional thinking. But they did, and he was able to get up and put the meals out. So. Just a thought on Eileen's guidance. Her guidance also came to her out of deep trauma, just like Eckhart Tolle. I think they're very similar in that they were both sort of in the depths of despair when Eileen heard the words, "Be still and know that I am God," and that's how the whole foundations proceeded. One of the community's favourite quotes is from Margaret Mead. "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing which ever has." And I just thought we here at Unity of Melbourne can gain further inspiration from part of their mission statement. As our service, and service is the hallmark of all those who enter the fourth dimension, we aim to pioneer, inspire, demonstrate, encourage and share our experience. It is the consciousness, motivation, mindfulness, creative energy and joy that we bring to all these activities that make visions a reality and bring lasting positive change to the world. And that's a hallmark also of everything that's done at Findhorn. Nobody ever cleans the floor or does any basic menial work without first tuning into their highest power and going out in the garden. If you're out in the garden, you pull out weeds and you think, what am I weeding out of my consciousness? There's the flowers bloom, you think, what is this meaning for my consciousness? So everything is done with mindfulness and consciousness of the highest power. We might never see angels or have glorious mystical experiences, but we wouldn't be here if we had not had a call to live according to a higher consciousness and to transcend our own boundaries. More than ever before, I think it seems important that we trust in the truth that as we develop in consciousness, we truly do help bring peace to the world. Lawrence Scovel-Shinn finishes her chapter called Casting the Burden with the quote from the book of Revelation, "And I saw a new heaven and a new earth." I'm not going to read that quote because our wonderful Bob is going to lead us in singing it as we all step out into bringing about the new heaven and new earth. Thank you, Bob.